not how you feel. I'm about to start one.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 3:30 on October 24th, 2023. I'd like to welcome you all to Richland County's Land Development Text Amendment Work Session. This meeting would now come to order. Madam Clerk, take the roll, please.
Brenham.
Here.
Pugh.
Here.
McBride. Livingston.
Here.
Teratio. Weaver. Barron.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Mackey.
Here.
English.
Present.
Newton. Here. We have a quorum.
All right, next item on the agenda is item 2. It's a presentation from Clarion and Associates. You are recognized, ACA Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. On the line today with us is Jeff Green, who's an attorney and associate with Clarion. And Clarion is our contracted vendor who prepared the red lines based on the Planning Commission recommendations. And so with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. Green.
Yes, sir, you may.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Jeff Green. I'm with Clarion Associates. We are a mid-sized planning firm. We have offices up here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, as well as Denver, Colorado. We have a lot of experience helping communities with code updates. And we were retained by the county to help with these updates to the adopted LDC. And I do have a presentation. I think, Madam Clerk, if it's possible for you to share that. Okay, this is great. Yeah, if you could move on to the next slide. So again, as you know, the updated Land Development Code was adopted just about 2 years ago. During preparation of the updated zoning map, there were some concerns expressed about some of the provisions in the adopted LDC text. So along with the process to adopt the new official zoning map, there were requests from the Planning Commission for some changes to the LDC text to address these concerns. And so we at Clarion Associates were engaged to complete this work, and we have some revisions that are being presented today. If you could go on to the next slide. This is just a quick slide providing a brief overview of the amendments. They're really sort of very targeted amendments. So these are sort of very narrow changes to the adopted text, not a lot of difference. So the 3 sort of very large lot districts, as well as the residential transition district, we've established new minimum lot sizes and made some small changes to the uses that are allowed. And I'll get into that in greater detail in some later slides. In the single family districts, R1 through R4, we've also added minimum and maximum lot sizes and modified some allowed uses as well. There was a request to retain the M1 district. So we have done that. We've carried it forward as what we call a legacy district. The intention being that the M1 that lands in the M1 district now will continue to be in the M1 district, but that no new lands will be assigned to that district. As part of your adoption of the official zoning map, properties in the RU district were transitioned to either the AG, HM, or RT districts. At the request of Planning Commission, we've added a 12-month window to allow property owners whose land is in one of those districts to apply to be rezoned to one of the other districts without having to pay an application fee. And we've also made some small changes to the green development incentives that are in the LDC. So if you could move on to the next slide. Thank you. So one of the things that we've done both in these sets of districts as well as the residential districts is establish some lot size standards. Our understanding is one of the concerns was that we wanted to make sure that new development that took place in the AG, HM, and RT districts was on lots that was consistent with the existing form of development within the county. And there was concern that some of these districts, they might have lots that are too small and development that is too close together, that it really wouldn't fit in with the existing character of neighborhoods. So that's one of the things we've done. For example, the AG, the minimum lot area, has been added in. It's 98,000 square feet, so just about 2 acres. The minimum lot area in the HM district is 50,000 square feet. It's a little over an acre. And in the RT district, the minimum lot area is 32,670 square feet. And there's also been sort of very slight increases in the allowable density in each of those districts. So you can see from AG, it's gone up from 0.15 to 0.33 dwelling units per acre. In other words, that's 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres. Sort of a similar change in the HM district, which now allows, under the proposed changes, 1 dwelling per 1.5 acres. And in the RT district, it's now 1 dwelling per acre. These are still quite low densities, but they're slightly a little bit higher than they used to be before. There have been a couple of small changes to the allowed uses. So veterinary hospitals and clinics are now allowed in AG, HM, and RT. There are special requirements that apply throughout the county where those uses are allowed, and those will be applied as well in those districts. So there's a limitation on where you can have buildings housing animals with respect to residential districts. All pens need to be enclosed, all feeding areas need to be enclosed, and a limitation on outdoor runs. Animal shelters are allowed in AG and HM, again, subject to special requirements, which are similar to the animal shelter, and I can go into a little greater detail if you'd like. And then one other change that is made in both these districts, and you'll also see them in the R1, R2, and R3 and R4 districts. There's a development option called cluster development. And the goal of cluster development is to preserve a greater amount of contiguous open space. And in exchange, developers are allowed some slight modifications to the standards that apply to individual lots, such as minimum lot size, in some cases minimum lot width. So we still have that cluster development option, but we've reduced the ability to reduce the minimum lot width from the standard requirement. The goal of that change is, again, to make sure that the lots, even if they're developed under the cluster development standard, that the individual lots are similar in size to the lots that already exist in the county. And we've also eliminated the 0 lot line development option for single-family detached dwellings. If you could go on to the next slide, please. As with those other districts, we've added new minimum lot size standards in R1, R2, and R3. And we've also added new maximum lot size standards, again, to provide some consistency. So for the R1 district, the lot area needs to be between 24,500 and 40,000 square feet. In the R2 district, it needs to be between 11,000 and 18,000 square feet. And in R3, between 5,500 and 9,000 square feet. There have also been some modest changes to the types of dwellings that are allowed in the R2, R3, and R4 district. The adopted LDC allows duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. So those are 2-family, 3-family, and 4-family homes in the R2, R3, and R4 district. Those have all been taken out. Townhomes have been removed from the R4 district as well, and manufactured homes have been reduced from R2. And just as we did in the AG, HM, and RT districts, removed the ability to reduce the minimum lot width if you're doing cluster development. And we've also, once again, eliminated the zero lot line development option. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So under the zoning map that you adopted, any property that was in the RU district that was 35 acres or larger was automatically transitioned to the new AG district. If it was between 3 and 35 acres in size, it was transitioned to the HM district. And anything in RU that was 3 acres or smaller was transitioned to the RT district. One of the changes that's been added in the LDC is a time limited provision. So any landowner that was in the RU district and was automatically transitioned to the RT, HM, or AG district is allowed to file for a rezoning to one of those other districts without paying any application fees. Again, this is not sort of an automatic switch. You know, they don't automatically get a rezoning. That remains in the council's discretion to award it. What this does is simply says if a landowner wants to apply to one of the other districts, and they do so within 1 year of the effective date of the new land development code, then they don't need to pay the application fee. So again, the council can decide to approve that zoning map change or can choose to deny it. Next slide, please.
Mr. Green, before you go to the next question, or
Yeah.
next slide rather, I've actually got some requests for questions. So Councilwoman Newton and then Vice Chair Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this presentation. I wholeheartedly support the provision that allows these homeowners currently designed rural to apply for a rezoning without an application fee. But I do want to clarify this line. What I heard you say is that if you're currently rural and you're rezoned to these 3 designations being RT, so rural transition or residential transition, homestead, or agricultural, the fee is waived for those persons. But what if you're currently zoned rural, RU right now, and you're rezoned to R1 or some other designation? Do those people also have the fee waived?
So if your property was in RU and was transitioned to one of those districts, and you, let's say you're in RT now and you want to rezone to R1, that is not, you have to pay the fee for those. It's only if you're rezoning, if you're in RT, HM, or AG and applying to rezone to one of those other 2 districts that you get the fee waiver.
Thank you. It looks like we have staff that wants to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the zoning map that was adopted by council a couple of meetings ago, there were no rezonings from RU to anything other than RT, HM, or AG. So that's all that occurred. So that scenario where somebody went from RU to R1 could not occur.
So then, while we are specifically saying what those zoning designations are, another way to say it is that any person who is currently zoned rural has that 1-year opportunity to request a rezoning.
Mr. Chair.
You recognize?
Yes, ma'am. But they can only request one of the different rural zonings. They could not request R1, R2, or some other without paying the fee.
All right, I'm going to process that, and thank you.
Ms. Mackey?
Thank you. Just clarification, what I heard him say is that they can make the request without a fee. It's not guaranteed that the request is approved. So the request is
That's
still going
correct.
through the normal process. The other piece is there max on, so if a person owns 3 or 4 different parcels, they get and they were all rural in different places, there's no max on how many free applications you get within the year period?
Mr. Green or ACA Jensen?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. So it would apply to every parcel. So if somebody had one parcel and then they had another parcel next door or down the road, and they said, we would like to request this one to go to HM, but we think the one down the road should be AG, and they were both RT to begin with, then yes, they could make that request.
Thank you.
Ms. Barron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to be clear about what Ms. Mackey just asked, and that is anyone who's going, that is requesting a rezoning, they're going to go through the regular process, our normal process, planning staff, planning commission, council. And so I see Mr. Jensen shaking his head. Ideally, maybe we won't have so many that will come through this process, but let's just say worst case scenario, we have hundreds of them. I can see how this could really be backlogged and probably take more than a year for us to get through. Do we have a contingency plan for worst case scenario? Because and let me ask this as well, as a I guess a connecting question. Do we have a contingency plan? And then also, will we put a moratorium on taking applications and such so that we can just deal with the influx of present day rezoning as a result of the LDC?
Recognize, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the requirement is simply that they apply within the 12-month window. So if we got an ordinance number, that's okay because we can space them out and we can handle them just as long as they apply within the 12-month window.
Oh, okay, so my second question before I ask an additional question, and so my second question would be, we will still continue to take applications during this period of time as well? New applications?
We would take them during the 12-month period because that's what the statute says, but we may consider them over a period of months that extend beyond it.
I don't think
Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense, but
ma'am.
that's not my question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And so my question is, we have the applications that are applying as a part or as a result of the LDC.
Yes, ma'am.
Then we have new applicant who just purchased a parcel of land and would like for it to be rezoned. Are both of these going on simultaneously, or will we just stop doing new applications so that we can deal with the influx from the LDC?
Mr. Chair.
Recognize, Mr.
They would be concurrent. So yes, so if somebody wanted to zone to something else, say R2, or if they wanted to go to commercial or something, we would consider those at the same time as the applications to convert from an RT to an HM or a similar request.
And just one final thing, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And that is that it does concern me more so for staff at how this process would work, because we traditionally have about 5 to 10 applications during zoning, so just thinking this through, I would imagine that we would probably have a few more come before us during this period of time, just so that we can continue to keep the ball rolling in the most expedient manner, but no response needed.
Mr. Branham, and then I know the county attorney wanted to chime in, but Mr. Branham, you first, and then the county attorney.
Had similar questions and conversations with staff, as Councilwoman Barron was indicating, and as I recall the conversation, and maybe Mr. Price or Mr. Jensen can confirm, but the history is that when there has been a change of kind of a wholesale change, if you were, they had not been overwhelmed previously with applications for change, and that was something that we took into account with the recommendation. Speak to that.
Mr. Chair.
Recognize.
Thank you. So this is the fifth time I've done something like this with a jurisdiction. The most recent one was with a jurisdiction of about 250,000 individuals, which is similar in size to what we have in unincorporated Richland County. And we had 13 requests as a result. Again, that was the other side of the country, but that was the scope, and that's fairly typical in other jurisdictions where we've done this.
Branham, anything else? Mr. Wright, you recognized.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think with state law, I don't think we can treat them differently. So I don't think we could stop the other ones to allow these to go forward. So I think we would have to take both of them, at least the applications at the same time.
Also, I'd like to recognize Councilwoman McBride. I didn't see you when you popped in, but I'm glad to have you here, Ms. McBride. And also, we have Councilwoman Allison Terracio as well. She is attending virtually, and I'm glad to see you online, Ms. Terracio. All right, continue on, Mr. Green.
Thank you. If you could move on to the next slide, please. One of the requests from the Planning Commission was to not transition properties in the current M1 district to new districts. In other words, to retain the M1 district so that lands in the M1 district would, continue to have all the same development rights that they do today. After discussion with staff, the approach we decided to take was to retain the M1 district as what we like to call a legacy district. So a legacy district is a district like any other. It's on the map, it's in the code. But instead of being with next to all of the other districts in Article 3 in the zoning district section of the code, it's located in an appendix. And the idea is that the M1 district as a legacy district continues to be applied to the land that it is applied to today, but that it's the intention of the county that it not be applied to new land in the future. So any land that's currently in the M1 district can still develop under the M1 regulations. The same sets of uses are allowed in the M1 district as they are today. And they can apply for a rezoning to another district. But once they do that, they can't go back to the M1 district. And any land that's not in the M1 district today cannot be assigned to the M1 district in the future. So essentially, as a legacy district, the idea is that the M1 district over time will be used less and less in the district, and that it's the other zone districts that more closely reflect the county's intentions for land use in the future. If you could move on to the next slide, please. And this is the last slide. So the development standards in the new LDC include some incentives for green building. And so developers who comply with these standards are allowed to get modest increases in residential density or height. One of the changes was to eliminate that ability to get additional height for residential development, and to also reduce the amount of additional density that's allowed. And the other change that's been made are some modest changes to the individual incentives. So there's one of the incentives, one of the options in the menu of green building incentives is for HVAC unit efficiency. That's been increased a bit at Planning Commission's request. There was a credit that you could get for pre-wiring homes for solar panels, but it became apparent that there were some potential warranty conflicts with solar installers and how that would work, so that was removed. And this is the example that you see here on the screen. Previously, you could get credit for 2 electric vehicle charging stations, and now the credit requires that you provide at least 4 of those. And that is a summary of all of the changes that are included.
Mr. Green, Mr.
Yes.
Green, I'm sorry to stop you. Mr. Brown, I know that I cannot direct your staff to do anything, but I would ask if you would direct someone on your staff to inform the folks in the lobby that we are actually having a council meeting. And I can hear them just as much as I can hear Mr. Green. Sorry about that, Mr. Green. Continue on.
No worry. I'm actually at the end of my presentation. The next slide is just asking for questions. So,
well, Madam Vice Chair, you recognized.
Thank you. And Mr. Green, I'm not sure if this is for you or staff, but I'm sure someone will answer appropriately. In relation to the credit for minimum of EV charging stations, can I just get clarification on the statement when some of it appears to be cut off, but I think it's for A and B is provided minimum of 4 EV level 3 charging stations parking structure. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, you recognize Mr. Green.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It's an excerpt. It is cut off. It's provide the 4 electric vehicle charging stations in a parking structure or off-street parking lot to those using the building.
And so just so I'm clear, so you said or off-street parking lot. So you're saying if they don't have a parking structure or garage, they still would have to provide street parking that has access to the EV chargers. Is that what that means?
It's so they would need to provide it either in a a parking structure or off-street parking that's in a surface lot. So it would not be on-street parking. It would not be parallel parking on a public street. It would be in their off-street parking lot.
But still have the level 3 charging stations.
Right. There's a
Okay.
credit for yes. There are two different types of credit: one for level 3 and one for level 2.
And then with either of these credits, is there any other number tied to it? For example, I'm thinking when you look at the dwelling size or density, is there anything that correlates to say 4 is enough based on occupancy of said building? Is there a formula that came up with this number, or is it just we pick 2 to 4?
I believe for the incentives, this was just a number to incentivize that a certain number of EV stations be provided. I can quickly look to see if there. I'm not sure if there are general electric vehicle parking requirements in the new LDC.
Right, you recognize Mr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 2021 code simply had, a certain number per development, and the Planning Commission felt that that was insufficient. But no, it is not prorated, which is, I think, is what you were saying is, as the development gets bigger, should the number be increasing? I would agree with that, but that's not how the 2021 was. But I understand what you're saying, and I think that's a good recommendation.
Okay, so just to officially, I'll say it so we're all on the
Yeah.
same page. I would like to officially make a recommendation that we consider some type of formula that may be.
Okay.
Branham?
So,
Mr. Branham, for the record,
Yeah.
this is the discussion portion of our agenda. I know we went to presentation, but we are now on the discussion portion of our agenda. Continue on, Mr. Branham.
thank you. If a developer is seeking certain credits when it comes to density of the development, there's a menu of green development practices available to them, and they can pick from the menu, but they have to reach a certain amount of green development practices to be instituted within a given project to reach the incentive. And so there is flexibility. Again, you can choose off the menu. You don't have to do specific things. So if I would understand it right, potentially someone could get double credit. Instead of doing just 4 EV charging stations, they could do 8, and then they could get double the credit. Does that sound right, Mr. Jensen? Or Mr. Price?
Mr. Chair.
Recognize.
Yes, I believe that's correct, that you could get it if you put in more. But if this is an issue that the council wants to make a floating standard or a standard based on a number of units, then that's something you could do too, but that is correct. If they were to put in 8, for example, they would get double the credit.
No discussion or comments? Body? Rod, you recognized.
Not in writing, it doesn't exist. So,
I'll second that.
point made.
No, go ahead. No, you got the floor, Ms. McBride.
I'm just following and trying to see, I'm not sure where we are with this at this point in terms of the credits. Are they going to come back as, Ms. Mackey?
So, Mr. Jensen, so I get Ms. McBride's question was, I guess, in light of the suggestion from Vice Chair Mackey, if this is something that staff is going to take up, will we need to pass the text amendments first and then come back and revisit this? Or is this something that could, I guess, tweaks, if you will, could be made as we are going through these readings. I think we've already we've had the first reading, if I recall correctly, or the text amendment. We got the public hearing coming up on November the 7th. Is that also the same night as the second reading as well?
Yes, sir.
So I'm assuming at this point, there can't be any sort of, I guess, amendments to the amendments. We would have to pass the text amendments before there can be any additional changes to the code, right, Mr. Right?
Well, Mr. Chair, as far as that, you can make changes until you vote on the third reading.
Okay.
So yes, if the next meeting, you see something in there that you want to adjust or change, you can. It's only once you vote on the third time, it's final.
I just remember, Mr. Wright, you repeatedly telling us you can't do anything until you actually have, a full code, meaning the
Right.
Text. I mean, the map and the
The text.
the text.
Right,
So,
and you have both at this point. So the text amendments will take effect the same day that the maps take effect. So this will go together.
Yep.
just the answer to Ms. McBride's question is that if the body wanted staff to take up Ms. Mackey's recommendation, we could do it at this juncture
Yes.
of the process.
And if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
what I suggest is that I will present both options at the next meeting in the packet, and the council can look and see if they prefer the option that is existing, which is multiple credits, based on the number provided, or if they would prefer a floating scale based on the number of units, for example, being constructed.
Okay, fair.
And Mr. Chair, sorry.
Well, Ms. Mackey and then Mr. Wright.
And I guess to also clarify that, so even with how it's currently presented, and like you said, you can get double credits, even if we did double credits, I still think there needs to be a parameter in place that states you get this credit if you have this many per se. And then so if you do it twice, that's great, but what is that number that you need to at least meet to even get this credit? That makes sense. So even if we don't do the sliding scale, I think there needs to be some notation that states a number tied to get this credit right here.
Mr. Wright?
Yeah, no, I just want to say that, and with this or any of the other amendments or requests, at this point is that when you can make any adjustments or changes. So this is when you need to do it if you want to do it.
Thanks for that. Mr. Wright. All right. Additional discussion, no questions.
Mr. Chair?
You recognize Mr. Racio.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm
Yes.
driving. So I guess my question is also a little bit about process and timing. As all of you all know, Miss English and I cover a neighborhood that very much would like to have some protection. And so my question is about applying, like a neighborhood character overlay. What is the appropriate time to submit a motion for a neighborhood that would like to be included under the neighborhood overlay?
Benson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have spoken with Ms. Tracio regarding this, and this is related to the Olympia neighborhood and a historic overlay that they are interested in. And I'm going to look to the county attorney for advice on this, but I have been told in past experiences, past situations, that something that is that significant would need to go back to planning commission and go through the full vetting process of public hearings and public comment, because it would affect multiple property owners, not just one or two. It's not just a simple text amendment. And so it is my recommendation that that is something that we take up through the normal process of public hearings and planning commission meetings and community meetings and so forth after these text amendments are completed.
All right, anything to add?
Yes, I would agree that would have to or need to go through the planning commission before it came back up to council, because these have already been through the planning commission, but that hasn't. So
I guess that's kind of what I was getting at too early, Mr. Wright, with my question. And maybe I wasn't that clear when I stated it, when I asked. Yes, I was just wondering if we were to make any changes or recommendations, would those have to go back to the planning commission? But like you just stated, what Ms. Mackey was recommending, that would not be, wouldn't have to rather go back before the planning commission.
No, because they've already seen these things, and that's an adjustment. So once it comes to council, council can adjust the recommendations of the planning commission, but that's something completely new.
Gotcha. Mr. Racio, anything else? Mr. Racio? I guess I'll give Ms. Newton the remainder of your time. Ms. Newton, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I'm going to make a statement, but look at staff so they can correct it. I think it might be important for the public to know, my understanding as it relates to the land development code is certainly we're making these amendments and changes here, but that council can come back and make amendments at any time. And some changes that are large, like the one we just talked about, might have to go to the planning commission, but other edits, might not. And so I guess it's been many, many years since we have updated the land development code. And so I would hate it if, as hard as we're working and as hard as we're trying to get it right, that people thought it would take another 10 years to fix things. So if someone could just address, the fact that we can continue to amend this document, it could be helpful.
Mr. Wright?
Yes. The holdup previously was that the maps hadn't been passed. So you have to complete the code before you can amend it. So now that y'all have passed the maps, you can make changes. You can do amendments. So yes, that barrier is taken care of now because the maps are passed. So we have a complete code. So now you can make amendments. So yes, you can do that at this point. Once it takes effect and all that. So we're in the point where now, yes, it can be changed.
All right. Okay, anything else? All right, next item. It's item 4, which I mentioned already, the public hearing coming up on November the 7th. Mr. Brown, any, comments from you as to efforts by your team to get the word out to the public?
We have provided information through a number of channels, Mr. Chair, and we expect that the citizens, if they have comments they want to make, will participate in that public hearing process. But there's no new additional information to provide other than we have noticed that and we have had individuals participate in a number of meetings related to the work sessions and related to the county meetings. So we feel that folks that are interested do pay attention to these notices.
Yes.
You
It
recognize.
was. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunities that you've provided at a community meeting that our staff graciously and facilitated very well last night. One of the things that was mentioned were that individuals could also send an email with their feedback if they weren't able to attend in person. And so I would just appreciate it if someone could share that information now as well, because everyone might not be able to come to our meeting.
An email, Ms. Newton?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could have Deputy Director Price address that email address so the folks that are listening can clearly get that, please.
All right, Mr. Price, if you would, please. Yeah, it's not on.
Okay. For those who want to email any comments they may have regarding the land development code, the new version that we have, or have any questions or any suggestions, they can email us at planningcommission@richlandcountysc.gov.
But G-O-V, right?
Yeah, if they wanted to get through, it's GOV. Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
can you get him to repeat that again?
Sure, if you don't mind, Mr.
Okay,
Price,
no
one more
problem.
time.
Again, that's planningcommission@richlandcountysc.gov.
Thank you, Mr. Price. All right, next item, adjournment. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved to properly second, non-debatable. Madam Clerk?
Brenham,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride. Yes. Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio, Weaver, Barron,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey, English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Are adjourned.